This video is sponsored by the Ultimate Freelancing Bundle by StudyWebDevelopment.com, which gives you everything you need to start your own freelancing business, including a 130-page in-depth guide, invoicing and client proposal templates, website templates, an SEO checklist, and much more. Visit the link in the description and use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off. Alright guys, in this video we're going to create a RESTful API using Flask, which is a Python web framework. And you basically have two big frameworks for Python. You have Django, which is very high level, opinionated, and then Flask, which pretty much allows you to do things however you want. And they're both great frameworks. They're just very different. And I do have a full Flask series on my YouTube channel if you want to build like a regular web app with Flask and kind of go over the fundamentals and stuff like that. Now, in addition to Flask, we're going to be using a couple extra packages to help us build a RESTful API. We're going to use SQL Alchemy, which is an object relational mapper. So it's a layer that allows us to interact with the database without having to write manual SQL queries and stuff like that. It's similar to like SQLize, like Mongoose for MongoDB, just an abstraction layer for our database, really. And then we're using Marshmallow for serialization. Basically, we just bring it in, we pass it into our schema, and it serializes and deserializes our objects. All right, so we're going to use Postman to make requests to our API and get the data back and stuff like that. So if you're following along, go ahead and download and install Postman if you don't have it already. And we're going to just jump right in. So I'm using VS Code for my text editor, and I just have an empty folder called Flask SQL Alchemy REST. And down in my terminal here, we're going to start off by creating our virtual environment using pipenv. And I have a crash course on pipenv, and it basically allows us to create a virtual environment and also keep all of our dependencies in one place. It's similar to how NPM works for Node.js. So first thing you need to do is install it. Of course, you need Python installed. If you do Python -- version, if it says version 3, you're all set. But if it says version 2, you need to go to python.org and download version 3, and then you should be able to say Python 3 -- version. Now, Python comes with a package manager called pip, and if you have to do Python 3, then you have to do pip3, and we're going to install pipenv. And mine's going to go very quick because I already have it installed. Okay, once you do that, you can simply run pipenv shell, and that's going to basically activate your virtual environment. It's going to create a pip file, which holds all of your dependencies, all your packages that you install. Okay, so let's install some dependencies. So we're going to say pip, let me just clear this up first. So we'll clear that up and we'll say pipenv install. And we need, of course, Flask, which is our framework. We're going to be using SQL Alchemy, so we want to use Flask -SQL Alchemy. We're going to be using Flask -Marshmallow. And we also need a package that integrates Marshmallow and SQL Alchemy. So we want Marshmallow, let's see, Marshmallow -SQL Alchemy. And I think that should do it. So let's install this stuff. And then after those packages are installed, they should get added to our pip file. So we'll take a look, and everything looks okay, good. So we'll clear this out, and let's create a file called app.py. And this is going to be our entry point. It's really the only file we're going to use. I'm going to put everything in here. Aside from our database file, we're going to be using SQLite 3, and we'll have a file for our database. So let's go ahead and bring in, we'll say from Flask, we want to import the main Flask framework. Let's also bring in request, and let's bring in JSONify. So basically, when you have a REST API, for the most part, you're going to return JSON data. And JSONify allows us to take like a dictionary or an array of dictionaries in Python and output them as JSON. So let's bring in the other stuff we need, such as Flask _ SQL Alchemy. So we're going to say, and from that we want to import SQL Alchemy like that. And then we also want Marshmallow, so from Flask underscore Marshmallow, we want to import Marshmallow. All right, and then another thing we want to import is just the core OS module, which is just a Python module to deal with, you know, file paths and stuff like that. And we need that to really pinpoint where we want our database files set up and stuff. So I'm just gonna go ahead and init our app with Flask. So we'll say app equals Flask, and I'm gonna pass in double underscore name double underscore. And then to run our server, so we'll say run server, and we can first of all check. Let's check to see if name, basically we're checking to see if this is the main file, so we want to see if that's equal to main. Then we want to take the app object and call run. And I'm just going to pass in an option of debug equals true since we're in development, and save. And now we should be able to run our server. If we go down here and we say Python and then call the file app.py, and as you can see, it's running on port 5000. Now, like I said, I do have a series on Flask if you want to learn how to build just a basic application using templates and stuff. We're building a RESTful API, meaning that we're returning JSON data for a client. So whether it's like a React app or something like that, a mobile app, anything, we're building basically like just a JSON microservice. So down here, I'm going to show you how to create a basic route. I'll delete this after, but just to show you how to create a route, we do app.route, pass in the endpoint. I'll just do slash. We can also say methods, and we can set that to some brackets, and we can specify like a get request. All right, and then we can create a function. So we'll say def, we'll call this get, doesn't really matter what we call it. And then what I want to do is simply return, and I want to return some JSON, so I'm going to say JSONify and then pass in just a Python dictionary. So we'll say MSG and we'll say hello world. Okay, we'll save that. And now if we head over to Postman and we make a GET request to HTTP localhost 5000 and I send, we get back JSON data, we get message hello world. Okay, so that's how routing works and also how to return JSON data. But I'm not going to keep that, I just wanted to show you an example. So what we need to do now is basically set up our SQL Alchemy database URI. So I'm going to create a variable called basedir, and what I'm doing here is just making sure that we can correctly locate the database file, which is going to be right in our root, but we basically need to let the server know exactly where it is. So we're going to use the OS package here. We're going to say .path.abspath for absolute path, and then pass in os.path.dir, which is the current file that we're in, so or folder that we're in. So double underscore file double underscore. So that's our base directory. Now let's set up our database. So we want to do app.config, and we're going to set, actually this needs to be brackets, and we're going to set SQL Alchemy, SQL Alchemy underscore database underscore URI, and we're going to set this to SQLite colon, and then we want 3 forward slashes, and then we're just going to concatenate on our os.path os.path.join, and we just want to locate the base directory, which we already created a variable for, so we'll pass in basedir, and then the file that I'm going to use for our database is going to be called db.sqlite. Okay, so basically this is going to look for a file called db.sqlite in the current folder structure, current folder that we're in. All right, next thing we want is just another app.config file that we don't need, but if we don't put it in here, it's going to complain in the console. It's going to give us a warning, and that's SQL Alchemy track modifications. We want to set that to false. So we'll say SQL Alchemy underscore track underscore modifications, and we want to set that to false. Okay, so that will stop it from complaining in the console. Next thing we want to do is initialize SQL Alchemy, or we'll say initialize DB. We'll create a variable called DB, and let's set it to SQL Alchemy, which we brought in up above, and then we need to pass in our app. Okay, we also want to initialize Marshmallow, say MA, and create a variable called MA and set it to, let's say, Marshmallow, and then also pass in our app. All right, so everything is basically initialized. We don't have our database file yet. I'm going to show you how to set that up as soon as we create our product class. Now, whatever resource you're going to have, or resources, whether it's a product or a blog post, to-dos, whatever it may be, you're going to create a class for. So let's say product class. We'll say class/model. And just going to create a basic Python class, so product, and it's going to get passed in DB, which is our SQL Alchemy, and then model, which will give us a bunch of predefined methods. And here's where we want to add all of our fields. So we want an ID, and the way that we assign fields is with db.column. Okay, so you want to say db.column, and then inside here it takes in parameters. The first is always going to be the data type, which in our case is going to be an integer. So db.integer, and then I also want this to be the primary key. So we're going to say primary key equals true, and this is also going to be auto increment by default. So when we insert one, it'll have an ID of 1, the next one will be 2, and so on. We also want a name, so this will be db.column. I'm going to make this a string, so we'll say db.string, and we can also limit the characters. We'll say 100, and I also want this to be unique. Okay, so I don't want two products to be able to have the same name, so we'll set unique to true. Okay, next thing is the description, and we'll set that to db.column, and this will also be a string. And let's do 200. And then the next field is going to be the price. So db.column, and this one's going to be a float, so db.float. And then the last will be the quantity, so qty equals db.column, and we're going to make this an integer, so dp.integer. All right, those are our fields. Next thing we need is our initializer, or constructor. So let's say define _init. And I do have a Python crash course on YouTube if you want to check that out, where we go over classes a bit more in depth. But basically what we're doing here is passing in, for one, self. Self is similar to how this works in other languages, other object-oriented languages. And then we also want each field. So we want name, description, not the ID though, just name, description, price, and quantity. Okay, and then we basically want to take, when these are passed in, we want to add them to basically to the instance. So we'll take self.name and set that to whatever name is passed in. Okay, same with description and price, and then also quantity. Okay, so that's it for the class. It's our base product class. And when you're building a real, like a production API, you're probably going to want to have different files for these, but I'm just putting everything right in the app file. And also, if you want to look into like relationships, the documentation is pretty good for, let's see, if we look at Flask -SQL Alchemy, go to a minimal, yeah, so this documentation is pretty good. As you can see, it's pretty much what we've already done. Initializing SQL Alchemy, creating a class with a model, we create our fields, and then let's see, for relationships down here, I was going to do this, but I didn't want to make the video too long, but you can create another class, like if you wanted a category, and you could simply create a category ID, which would be a foreign key field. All right, so if we wanted to, and that may be something that you want to add on after this. I always say to you guys that you should take the tutorials that I do and add on to them and make them, even better. So maybe you can do that, add categories to this API. Anyways, let's get back to our file here, and we want to create a product schema. So we're going to go right here and say product schema. So this is going to be another class, and this is where we use Marshmallow. We pass it in ma.schema. Okay, so we want to pass that in, and then we want to do class meta, and this is basically the fields that we're allowed to show. Like if you didn't want to show the ID or something like that, you could leave it out, but I want to show everything, even the ID. Even if we do a get request to show all the products, I want the ID to show. So we're going to put in everything here: ID, name, description, price, and quantity. All right, and that's it. Now down here we have to initialize our schema. So we're going to create a variable called product_schema, or as Wes Boss says, schema. If you guys watch the syntax, or if you listen to the syntax podcast. So product schema, and we need to pass in here an option of strict equals true. If we don't do that, the console is gonna give us a warning. So that's why we're doing that. And we have to do another one called products_schema. Now, the reason for this is because depending on what we're doing, we're either dealing with a single product or many products. So for instance, if we're fetching a list of products, that has to do with multiple products, right? If we're updating a product or we're fetching a single product, then that has to do with just one product. So we need a product schema and a products schema. So the only difference here, I can actually copy this. The only difference is we're going to add an option here of many and set that to true, meaning that we're dealing with more than one product. Okay, so that's pretty much it as far as setting up our class and schema and all of that. Now we need to create our routes, but before we do that, let's go ahead and save this, and we need to create our database, because right now you guys are probably saying, where the hell is our database? Now, what's really cool about SQL Alchemy is we can generate it very quickly based on what we've already done here as far as the fields and stuff. So I'm going to just exit out of the console here real quick with Control-C, and we're going to just go into the Python shell. And all we need to do here is 2 lines of code. We need to first import, we're going to say from app, meaning the app file we just created. We want to import DB, so basically our SQL Alchemy. And then there's a method that we can use called create all that will do just what I said. Look at all of the fields that we created and then create the columns that are needed, basically create our database. So we're going to say db.create_all and run this method. And as soon as we do that, over here you'll see that it created a file called db.sqlite. okay, which we can't read. I think there are extensions we can use for VS Code to be able to read these things, but this is basically our database, and it has all of our columns. It has everything set up, which is really cool and really easy. So next thing is our routes. Obviously we need a way to interact with our database, so we need to create our endpoints. So first one I'm going to do is to create a product. Okay, so again, just like I showed you earlier, to create a route, we do @app.route, and the route that I want to use is /product, and let's say methods, and we're going to restrict it to post, so we'll say post, and then right under that, and don't do this, don't do colon and then indent. That's something that I struggled with for a while and did for a while. You want to go directly under it on the same level and create your method. So let's call this add_product. Okay, then we do our indent. So let's get, because when we make our post requests with Postman, we're going to attach a bunch of fields to it: the name, description, price, quantity. So let's set variables that fetch those, and the way that we do that is by using request. Remember, we brought in request from Flask, and we want to do request.json, since it's going to be JSON data, and we want the name. And we'll copy this down 3 more times. Next one's going to be description, and then we want our price, and then we want our quantity. Okay, so we're bringing in the data that's passed in from Postman or from React, Vue, wherever the hell your data is coming from. So next thing I'm going to do is create a variable called new product, and we want to set this to our product class, and we want to pass in the name, description. So we're basically instantiating an object here, price, and QTY. So this is all stuff that's coming in from Postman or from our client. Then what we do is we take DB and we call .session.add, and we pass in our new product. And then to finally commit it to the database or save it to the database, we do db.session.commit. And then, of course, we need to return something. So let's say return, and we want to take our product underscore schema. Okay, we're dealing with a single product, so it's product schema. And then we can actually do .jsonify, and then we pass in our new product. That's what we want to return to our client. Okay, and that's it. Let's save it, and we'll test it out. So actually, we need to exit out of our Python shell down here, and let's just run python app.py. Okay, so now we'll go to Postman, and let's make a post request to 5000/product, and we need to go to headers and say that the content type is going to be application/JSON. And then in body, I'm going to choose raw, so we can just send some raw JSON. And we're going to put a name. Just say product 1. And description. This is product 1. We need a price. So let's say $3.50. Remember, that's a float. And then quantity. Let's say that there's 100 of these. All right, so let's try it out. We'll send. And we down here we get a status of 200, meaning everything's okay, and it gives us back our product. And you can see it added the ID of 1. And this is going to be auto increment. So that seems to be working fine. So now we're going to go back and create our next route, which is going to be to fetch all products. So down here, we'll say get all products. So again, we need a route. So app.route, and the route is actually going to be the same as the one we just did. It's going to be product/product, except the methods, it's going to be a get request. Okay, and then we're going to create a function. So we'll define a function called get products, and I'm going to create a variable here called all_products, and we're going to set that to our model, or to our class, which has a method on it called query, and then we want to get all. So query.all. That'll get all the products for us. And this is why SQL Alchemy is great, because we don't have to say select all from products or whatever. It makes things much easier. And then we're going to get a result. So let's say result, and we'll set this to products, product schema, okay, because we're dealing with more than one product. And then it has a method called dump, and we want to dump all products. All right, and then all we have to do is return JSONify, and then that result object or dictionary will have a property called data that will include all the product data. Okay, or I should say the list of data or list of products. So let's save that, and let's go over to Postman, and I'm going to open up a new tab here. Let's make a GET request to HTTP localhost product and send, and there we go. And you can see that it's an array. So if I go back to this other tab and we add a new one, let's say product 2, we'll say this is product 2, change the price to 150, we'll say quantity 40, and send. Okay, so we get our response back. But if we go back to our GET request to get all products, now you can see we're getting product 2. Okay, so now we've handled creating them, getting all products. Now what about getting a single product? Let's do that. So I'm just going to copy this, and let's say get single product. Now the route for this, obviously we need to know which product we're getting. So we're going to have a parameter here where we use angle brackets, and then basically a query parameter, so ID. All right, and this is going to be a GET request. We're going to change this to get product instead of get products, the name of the function. And we can query this. Let's change this from all products to just product. And then we can take our product class here, and we can call query.get. Instead of all, we want to do get, and then we just simply pass in the ID. Okay, now we don't have to do this because we're not dealing with an array, we're dealing with just a single product. So we can actually go right from our schema, so product underscore schema, and we can say dot JSONify and then product. All right, so let's save that. Let's try it out. So we're going to make a GET request now to /product and then /an ID. So let's say 2 and send, and we get an error. Get product got an unexpected keyword argument of ID. Let's see. Oh, okay. So I forgot to pass in. We have the ID here coming into the route, but we have to pass it into the actual function. Okay, let's try that. So we'll send again, and there we go. So now we can get product. That's 1. That's 2. Let's get 1. Okay, good. So next thing we want to do is we'll update a product. So I'm actually going to copy the create because it's kind of similar. So we're going to copy that whole thing there. And let's say update a product. So this obviously needs to know which product to update. So again, we want to do ID, and the method is going to be a put. When you update something on the server, it should be a put request. And we're going to change this to update product, and of course we need to pass in our ID. We don't want to make that mistake again. And we need to first fetch the product. So let's create a variable called product and set it to our class, which has a method query or a property query object, whatever, that has a method called get, and we want to pass in our ID. Okay, now we also need to get all of our fields from the body of the request, so that's what this is doing. And then down here, we basically need to construct a new product to submit to the database. So we're going to say product.name equals name, product.description, product.price is going to equal price that's passed in, product.quantity equals quantity, and then down here we don't need to do this add, we just need to commit. So we're going to say db.session commit, and then we're going to return product schema JSONify product. So that should update it in our database. So let's save that. Let's go and let's make a put request. Actually, let's go back to this tab where we made the post, and let's say put. And we still have in the headers our content type of JSON, and in the body, let's well, actually in the URL we need to specify what we want to update. Let's update product 2, and we'll change it from a number 2 to just 2 like that. We'll say this is product 2 updated. We'll change the price here to $2.50. We'll say we ran out 20, so we're down to 20 quantity, and let's send. Gives us our response. Now let's make a get request to just products so we can see them all, and you can see that it's been updated. So product 2, this product 2 has been updated. All right, so now the last thing we need to do to make this a full CRUD API is a delete. Oops, we want to go over here. So let's see, I'm actually going to copy this get single. And we'll go right here and we'll say delete product. So route is going to be, again, just product/ID, and then method is going to be delete. Okay, so we'll change this to delete product, pass in the ID, and then we're going to say product equals query. This is going to stay the same because we need to know which one to delete. And then we want to put in right here db.session.delete, and then just pass in the product. And then one thing you want to make sure you do after you do the delete is commit, because this screwed me up. I forgot the commit and it wasn't deleting, and I couldn't figure out why. So make sure you do db.session.commit. Okay, so now let's head over to Postman, and instead of a put request, we're going to make a delete to product/2. We'll send it. It's going to give us that product back, but it's going to then get deleted off the server. So if we go and we make a get request to just product and we send, you can see that that product has now been deleted. All right, so we've created a full CRUD API using Flask, SQL Alchemy, Marshmallow. So you could do it without SQL Alchemy, but it's a lot more difficult. That's what initially I was going to use Flask RESTful, but it's much harder, and it's just unnecessary. SQL Alchemy definitely makes things easier. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I may do another video where we build a front end to this, but I would encourage you to do that on your own. You have, all your full CRUD functionality on the server. So, but yeah, that might be something I'll do. But that's it. If you like this video, please leave it a like, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, one of the best, if not the best resource I can refer you to for starting a freelance business is at studywebdevelopment.com/freelancing. The creator Kyle shared it with me, and I can personally vouch that this bundle is well worth it. You get a 130-page guide to freelancing, and it comes with things like invoice templates, client proposals, HTML and CSS templates, a portfolio website, access to a private Facebook community, and much more. So use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off today.